Travis Nolan had exactly 3 minutes to get his 5-year-old son, Zayden, through the school gates before the bell rang, and 0 minutes to deal with the woman he accidentally slammed into on the sidewalk. "Watch it," she snapped as Travis stumbled back, gripping Zayden's tiny hand tighter. "I'm so sorry," he said quickly, catching his breath. "We're late for school and I wasn't looking." The woman, tall and elegant in a navy coat that looked way too expensive to be walking these streets, stared down at the coffee splattered across her white blouse. Her jaw clenched, but her eyes, hazel and sharp, flicked to Zayden and softened slightly. "Go," she said, waving him off. Her voice was clipped but not unkind. Travis didn't waste another second. "Thank you," he said, tugging Zayden along. "Let's hustle, buddy." They ran the last block, Travis's old sneakers slapping the pavement, Zayden giggling as he tried to keep up. The kid loved mornings like this, chaotic, rushed, full of laughter and bad breath and mismatched socks. Travis, not so much. After handing Zayden off with a quick hug and a reminder to eat his fruit, he jogged back toward the spot of the collision. He didn't expect the woman to still be there, but she was standing beside a sleek black car, dabbing at her blouse with a napkin. "I really am sorry," he said, breathless again. "I wasn't paying attention. Your shirt, do you want me to pay for it?" She looked up. Her eyes were cooler now, assessing. "You think you can afford this blouse?" Travis blinked. "You'd be surprised what can afford. But no, you're probably right. Still, it's not about the money. It's about the fact that I ran into you like a complete idiot." The corner of her mouth twitched, like she was trying not to smile. "And yet, you're not an idiot, just a dad with a kid and a bad sense of time." He laughed, "Exactly that." She folded her arms, the wind tugging at her sleek ponytail. "What's your name?" Travis Nolan." "Emily Thatcher," she said, extending a hand. Her grip was confident, warm. It wasn't until her driver opened the car door for her that it clicked. The way she walked, the way the driver waited on her like she was royalty. He'd seen her face before on the side of buses, on billboards downtown. CEO of Thatcher Tech, billionaire software mogul, Emily freaking Thatcher. She was already sliding into the car when he found his voice again. "Wait, you're..." "I know," she said, waving her hand with a tiny smile. "Try not to run me over next time." Then the door shut, and the car pulled into traffic like it belonged in a James Bond movie. Travis stood there, stunned, before slowly walking toward the subway, shaking his head. What were the odds? Emily couldn't stop thinking about him. Travis Nolan. There was something about the way he'd looked at her, stressed, disheveled, but grounded. Real. She met men in suits all day, men who knew her net worth down to the last dollar before they even said hello. But this guy, he didn't know, he didn't care. And he had a kid. A cute one. Back at her office, she tried to focus on meetings, product launches, and firing a VP who had been skimming from the budget, but Travis's face kept flashing through her mind. The embarrassment in his eyes. The way he'd apologized without groveling. And that laugh. By afternoon, she did something completely out of character. She told her assistant to cancel her evening and grabbed her coat. 3 days later, Travis was back on the same street, this time with slightly more time to spare. Zayden was chattering about dinosaurs, and Travis was trying to mentally calculate how many hours he could pick up at the mechanic shop this weekend without losing his mind. Then he saw her, standing outside a small coffee shop, alone. She saw him too. "You again," she said, raising an eyebrow. "You again," he replied, slowing down. "You stalking the school route now?" "Maybe I like danger," her lips curved. "Or maybe I owe you a coffee." He frowned, "Pretty sure I owe you one, or 1,000. "I'm rich," she said simply. "Let me buy you one." He hesitated, looking down at Zayden. "I've got juice," Zayden announced, holding up his little thermos triumphantly. "Then it's settled," Emily said, opening the door. Inside, the shop was warm and smelled like cinnamon. Emily ordered 2 lattes and paid before he could argue. He noticed the barista's eyes widen when she said her name, and Travis knew she came here often. "So," she said, sliding into the booth, "you live around here." "Couple blocks down, rent-stabilized apartment, you." "Penthouse in Midtown." He choked on his coffee. "Kidding, well, not really, but I grew up in Queens, not too far." "You don't seem like someone who grew up in Queens." She shrugged. "Well, you don't seem like someone who changes his kids' lunchbox stickers every week." He laughed. Zayden's obsessed with rotating themes. This week it's T. Rick says. Zayden, sitting beside him coloring on a napkin, grinned. Next week is space. Emily smiled at him. "I like space." For a moment the three of them just sat there. It felt weirdly natural. Over the next few weeks, they kept running into each other. Sometimes it was outside Zayden's school, sometimes near the coffee shop. One morning she showed up with a new thermos for Zayden. It had planets on it. "A gift," she said lightly, "from one space lover to another." Zayden hugged her leg. Travis stared at her like she'd grown wings. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." It was like that with her. She didn't push. She didn't flaunt her money, she just showed up. And Travis found himself wanting her to. He hadn't dated anyone seriously since Zayden's mom left. He didn't have time for games, and he sure as hell didn't have time for women who wanted to fix him. But Emily wasn't like that. She didn't try to change him, she just listened. And she made him laugh. One night, after he'd finally found someone to babysit Zayden, they went to dinner. She picked the place some rooftop restaurant he'd never be able to afford in a million years, but when he saw her waiting at their table in a red dress, smiling like he was the only person in the world, Travis didn't care how much the steak cost. "You okay being here?" she asked after they ordered. He leaned back in his chair. "I'm not used to places with more forks than people, but yeah, I'm okay." She laughed. "You're not like anyone I've ever met." "Good different or bad different?" Emily tilted her head. "The kind that makes me want more." Travis's heart thudded. He reached across the table, taking her hand. "Me too." And for the first time in years, it felt like something real was beginning. "You didn't eat," Emily said, leaning on her elbow as Travis nudged a perfectly seared scallop across his plate. The city lights flickered behind her through the glass, casting soft silver against her cheekbone. "I'm not used to food that looks like art," he replied, setting down his fork. "I feel like I'm ruining a painting." "You're supposed to ruin it, that's the point." She picked up her wineglass and sipped. "Besides, you had 3 of those mini rolls before the starters came. I was counting." He grinned. "They were warm and free." "Technically, they're on my tab." "Still counts." He leaned back, watching her. "This is your world, huh?" She glanced at the skyline. "Sometimes it feels like someone else's." Travis didn't press. He didn't need to. The way her fingers tapped lightly against the base of her glass said more than words could. He looked at her, really looked, and not just as the woman who could afford this place without blinking. Her shoulders were straight, her voice confident, but something lived behind her eyes. Something that told him she wasn't nearly as untouchable as the rest of the world seemed to believe. "Why me?" he asked suddenly. Emily tilted her head. "Why not you?" "I'm a single dad with a busted truck and oil stains on every shirt I own," he said. "You're this." He gestured vaguely to the glittering restaurant, the designer heels, the way the maitre d' had practically bowed to her. Emily looked at him evenly. "You're present, you listen, you don't ask me what my stock price closed at, and you didn't flinch when I picked the wine." "I didn't know what it was," he admitted. "But I figured if it came in a bottle and wasn't in a box, it had to be fancy." That made her laugh, not a polite chuckle, but a genuine, full laugh that drew curious glances from the next table. "I needed that," she said, once the laughter faded. He reached across the table, brushing his fingers over hers. "Good." Later, in the car, she insisted on calling for both of them. They rode in silence for a few blocks. The driver kept his eyes forward, professional and invisible. "I don't usually date," Emily said, watching the city blur past the window. "I don't either," Travis replied, "not since Zayden's mom left." She turned to him but didn't ask. He appreciated that. "She came by once just after his 3rd birthday," he continued. "Said she'd changed her mind, then she saw how much work it was." Emily's voice was quiet. "You've raised him alone since then." He nodded. "Mostly. My sister helps when she can, but yeah, it's been me and him." The car pulled up to his building brick, worn, but clean. The front light flickered like it did every few weeks when the wiring got temperamental. "Do you want to come up?" he asked, surprised at himself even as the words left his mouth. She looked at the building, then back at him. "I'd rather not meet your son at midnight. You've got him tomorrow." "Yes, every day." She nodded. "Then let's do something different." "Different how?" "Bring him next time." He blinked. "To what, a board meeting?" "No," she said, smiling faintly. "To the museum." He hesitated. "You like museums?" "I like 5-year-olds who love dinosaurs," she said. "And I like men who aren't afraid to share their chaos." He stepped out of the car and leaned in through the window. "You're full of surprises, Emily." She met his eyes. "So are you." The next morning, Zayden was bouncing on the couch in a shirt with a T-Rex skeleton wearing sunglasses printed across the front. "Is this good?" he asked, holding out a tiny model of a triceratops. "Do you think she'll like it?" Travis looked at the plastic figure. "I think she'll love it." "She's fancy," Zayden said thoughtfully, chewing on a cereal bar. "She smells like flowers and not like peanut butter." "That's true," Travis agreed. "She probably doesn't spill juice on her pants." Zayden giggled. "We should bring her snacks." "I think she's got snacks covered, bud." Emily was already waiting at the museum entrance when they arrived, dressed low-key in jeans and a soft gray coat, her hair tucked under a cap. Still, people turned to look at her, even if they didn't quite know why. Zayden ran up to her without hesitation. "This is for you," he shouted, thrusting the triceratops forward. Emily crouched to his level, accepting it like it was made of diamonds. "You brought me a dinosaur. That's the nicest thing anyone's given me all week." Zayden beamed. Inside, Travis watched them move through the exhibits like they'd known each other forever. Emily read every placard with interest, let Zayden pull her from one display to another, and even joined him in the interactive fossil dig, kneeling in the sand and laughing as he covered her hand in powder. "You're good with him," Travis said, once Zayden ran ahead to the next room. "I like kids," she replied, brushing sand from her jeans. "They're honest, and they don't care how many zeros are in your bank account." He studied her profile. "You miss having that." She hesitated. "I never had it to begin with." His chest tightened. They sat on a bench in the planetarium, the domed ceiling swirling with stars above them. Zayden, having worn himself out, was curled beside Travis, thumb in mouth, eyes wide as galaxies spun overhead. Emily leaned closer. "Haven't done this in years." Travis glanced at her. "What?" Stared at fake constellations. "No," she said softly. "Let someone matter." He didn't know what to say to that, so he reached out, took her hand, and said nothing at all. Afterward, she walked them to the subway. Her driver had been waiting nearby, but she refused the car. "I like the noise," she said. "Reminds me I'm not as far removed as people think." Zayden hugged her again, this time tighter. "Thanks for the Dino day." Emily ruffled his hair. "Thanks for being my tour guide." As her gaze met Travis's, something shifted. There was a question in her eyes, one she didn't voice, but he felt it. And he knew his answer. "Come over next weekend," he said. She blinked. "To your place." "We'll make pancakes. Zayden's in charge of toppings." She smiled, slow and genuine. "I'll bring the syrup." That night, after Zayden had fallen asleep with a book across his chest, Travis sat at the kitchen table, staring at the little plastic triceratops on the counter. He didn't know what he was stepping into. He only knew this. Emily Thatcher wasn't just a headline or a net worth. She was real, and more than that, she wanted to be. And for the first time in a long time, so did he. Travis opened the door with a spatula in one hand, the faint scent of vanilla and burnt batter trailing behind him. Emily stood in the hallway holding a paper bag with a bottle of maple syrup poking out the top, dressed in a soft sweater and jeans that were a far cry from her usual sleek wardrobe. "You're early," he said, stepping aside as she walked in. "You texted at 7 that the pancake prep had begun. I took it as a challenge." "Zayden's in the middle of a toppings debate," he said, nodding toward the kitchen. "He's weighing marshmallows against blueberries like the fate of the world depends on it." Emily grinned and followed him in. Zayden sat cross-legged on a stool, brows furrowed as he stared at two bowls. "Do I want sticky or squishy?" Emily leaned over the counter. "How about both? Life's better when it's complicated." Zayden looked at her like she'd offered him a dragon. "Both." Travis turned back to the stove. "Don't encourage him." "I'm encouraging chaos," she said. "It builds character." The kitchen was small, with faded tiles and cabinets that needed repainting, but Emily didn't seem to notice. She moved easily, pouring juice into mismatched glasses, wiping a smudge from the counter with a napkin, and laughing when Zayden insisted she wear the apron with the superhero print. Travis watched her for a moment, then flipped the last pancake onto a plate. "You want to eat out on the fire escape. It's technically not legal, but the view of the alley's unbeatable." She tilted her head. "Tempting." They ended up at the tiny table by the window instead, with Zayden narrating his every bite like a food critic. "You really don't mind this?" Travis asked under his breath. Emily looked around the kitchen. "Mind what?" "This, the mess, the syrup on the ceiling, the fact that I had to unplug the toaster so the microwave would work." She leaned her chin into her palm. "I've been to dinner parties where the napkins were folded like swans and everyone was pretending to like each other. This," she gestured around, "this is honest." Later, while Zayden played with building blocks in the living room, Emily stood beside the window, gazing out at the city stretched in layers of brick and clotheslines. "You always wanted to be a mechanic?" she asked, not turning around. "No," Travis said, folding a towel. "I went to school for architecture, didn't finish. Life shifted." Her expression flickered. "You still draw?" "Sometimes, when Zayden's asleep and I'm not dead tired." He hesitated. "You ever want something else?" Emily turned to face him. "I wanted quiet, then I built a company that made noise." He leaned against the counter. "You could walk away." "I could," she said, "but I'm not sure who I'd be if I did." "You'd still be you." Her eyes met his. Would that be enough? He didn't answer right away. "It is for me." The silence between them stretched, not awkward, but waited. "I want to show you something," she said suddenly. "Tomorrow night." "What is it?" "A part of my world, the part I usually keep closed off." Travis raised an eyebrow. Should I wear something that doesn't have a cartoon character on it? She smiled. Just wear something that won't get you kicked out of a hotel lobby. The next evening, he left Zayden with his sister and took the train to Midtown. Emily met him outside a towering glass building where uniformed valets guided sleek cars into underground garages. She wore a tailored black coat, her hair pulled into a braid that made her look younger, softer. "This is your territory," he said, glancing at the revolving doors. "This is my cage," she replied. "At least tonight you're with me in it." She led him through a marble-floored lobby and into an elevator that required a keycard. It opened directly into a penthouse that looked like it had been plucked from a luxury magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, everything in shades of white and silver. Travis stepped in slowly. "You live here?" "Technically, yes. Emotionally, not really." She took him to a side room, smaller, warmer. A piano sat in the corner, and the walls were lined with photographs, unpolished ones, of beaches and street markets, faces laughing mid-conversation. "These aren't for guests," she said. "No one ever comes here." He moved closer to one of the photos, a candid shot of her in a sundress, laughing with a little girl by a fountain. "My niece," she said. "She lives in France now." "You look happy in this." "I was. That was before the first acquisition. Before everyone started calling me ma'am and stopped making eye contact." He stood beside her. "Why show me this?" "Because you're the only person I know who doesn't expect anything from me." "I expect pancakes," he said, "and honesty, that's about it." She looked at him for a long moment. "I'm selling the company," she said. Travis blinked. "You're what?" "I've been thinking about it for months. The board doesn't know. My advisors keep telling me I'm crazy." She exhaled. "But I'm tired of building things that don't mean anything to me anymore." "Why now?" "Because you reminded me that I'm allowed to want something different." He stepped closer. "What do you want?" She didn't answer. Instead, she moved to the window, her silhouette framed by the skyline. "I want to know what it's like to wake up without 3 meetings before breakfast. I want to walk to the park without a security detail. I want to know if this," she gestured between them, "could be real outside of stolen mornings and syrup-stained kitchens." Travis crossed the room and stood behind her. "It is real." She turned and her expression was unguarded. "Then prove it." He kissed her. Not the kind of kiss that was meant to impress or distract or claim. It was tender, certain, and slow, a question, and an answer wrapped into one. When they pulled apart, Emily rested her forehead against his. "I've been in boardrooms with billion-dollar contracts on the table. I've never felt this nervous." "That's because this actually matters," he whispered. They stood there, city lights flickering around them. 2 lives that shouldn't have intersected now tangled in a way neither of them could unfeel. And for the first time since she'd built her empire, Emily Thatcher wasn't thinking about profit margins or quarterly goals. She was thinking about pancakes. And the man who made them. Travis stood outside the courthouse steps, hands tucked into the pockets of his only pressed coat, watching the revolving doors with a tightness in his chest he couldn't name. The morning air was sharp, the kind that made your breath visible and your thoughts louder than they should be. He wasn't sure why he had agreed to come, maybe because Emily had asked, and there weren't many things in this world he could say no to when it came to her. He spotted her just as she stepped out, flanked by a man in a dark suit and a woman with a thick folder tucked against her ribs. Emily paused when she saw him, her eyes catching his like a lifeline. "You came," she said once she reached him. "You asked." She exhaled, slow and deliberate. "It's done. The board signed off this morning. The sale will be finalized by the end of the quarter." He looked at her, searching for regret. "How do you feel?" Lighter, she said, then added, terrified. They walked, not toward her car, but down the street, away from the noise. She didn't say thank you, and he didn't need her to. There was something weightier between them now, something that didn't require constant articulation. After several blocks, she stopped in front of a small gallery. The kind of place most people passed without noticing. The windows were cluttered with canvases from artists no one had heard of yet, and the sign above the door was half lit. I used to come here in college, she said, nudging the door open, when classes were too much or the world felt too loud. Travis followed her inside. The scent of turpentine and dust filled the air. Paintings lined the walls, some finished, others raw with emotion. She led him to the back corner, where a piece hung in a thin black frame. It was abstract, all jagged lines and uneven shades of gray and gold. This was the first piece ever bought, she said. I had to eat ramen for a month after. What spoke to you? He asked. It didn't make sense at first, but it made me feel something. Like chaos could be beautiful if you just stopped trying to fix it. Travis studied the painting, then looked at her. You think I'm your chaos. I think you're the first thing that's ever made me stop trying to be perfect. Outside, the clouds had thickened. Rain threatened, but hadn't yet begun. They walked in silence, her hand brushing his just enough to keep him grounded. Back home, Zayden had built a rocket ship out of cardboard boxes and was wearing a colander on his head. Emily crouched beside him without hesitation. What's the mission today, Commander? She asked. We're going to Saturn to get ice cream, he declared. It's mint chocolate chip there. Obviously, she said, adjusting his helmet. Travis leaned against the doorframe, watching them. He hadn't expected this her in his home, not just present, but participating. She never hovered, never tried to control. She stepped into their lives like she belonged, and the strangest part was she did. That night, after Zayden had fallen asleep surrounded by crayon drawings and sticky stars, Emily sat on the couch nursing a cup of tea. Travis joined her, dropping beside her with a quiet exhale. He told me today he wants to be an astronaut, she said, staring into her cup. Said I'd be his co-pilot. He doesn't ask just anyone, Travis said. You're in the inner circle now. She looked over at him. You know what scares me more than walking away from everything I built? He shook his head. Losing this, she said. You, him, this version of myself that I only seem to find here. He took the mug from her hands and set it on the table. Then don't lose it. I don't know how to do this long term, she whispered. I've never had to consider someone else in my decisions. I've never had. She hesitated. A family. He brushed her hair behind her ear. Then we figure it out together, day by day. Her eyes glistened, and she didn't blink it away. She let it exist, the vulnerability, the rawness. Then she leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. A few weeks later, Emily invited him and Zayden to a formal event at the City Conservatory, a benefit gala for underfunded arts programs. She hesitated when asking him, aware of what it might mean, what it might expose. It'll be a lot of cameras, she said. A lot of people pretending to be more important than they are. Will there be cake? Probably. Then we're in. He wore a suit borrowed from his brother-in-law. Zayden wore a clip-on tie and sneakers that lit up when he walked. Emily met them outside, her gown a deep navy with silver threading, understated but elegant. Inside, the crowd was as she'd warned, polished, rehearsed, and loud with silent judgment. But Travis didn't flinch. He held her hand. He introduced Zayden to the mayor's wife. He danced with her once, beneath a canopy of twinkling lights and whispered strings. You don't belong here, one of her former board members said to her in passing, eyeing Travis and Zayden with a smirk. No, she agreed, I don't. She found Travis again near the garden doors, watching Zayden chase glowing butterflies in the projection exhibit. Let's go, she said, lacing her fingers with his. They left early, walking hand in hand through the quiet streets. She kicked off her heels and carried them. You know, he said, I always thought love was supposed to be fireworks, something that exploded and took everything with it. And now I think it's more like gravity. Quiet, constant, impossible to ignore. She stopped walking, turned to him. Marry me. He blinked. What? I mean it, she said. Not later, not someday, now marry me. Emily, he breathed, stunned. Are you serious? I don't want to spend another day wondering if I belong in this life or that one. I want both. I want you. I want Zayden. I want pancake sundaes and cardboard rockets and fights about laundry. He stepped closer, cupped her face. You're not proposing because you're afraid, are you? I'm proposing because I'm done being afraid. He kissed her. They got married in the park where he used to take Zayden after school, just close family, a few friends, and a justice of the peace who wore sneakers under his robe. Emily wore a simple dress. Zayden carried the rings in a box he'd decorated himself. There were no press releases, no headlines. Just a woman who had built empires and a man who had built cardboard castles, standing together in the middle of their chosen chaos, finally home. And when the first drops of rain fell, they didn't run. They just laughed, arms around each other, hearts wide open. The air inside the old brownstone was thick with the scent of cinnamon and something sweet baking, but Emily couldn't focus on anything except the way Travis was pacing in the living room, one hand tugging at the collar of his shirt. Zayden, now 6 and missing his front tooth, was in the kitchen with Travis's sister, making what he claimed was a wedding pie. Emily adjusted the frame on the mantelpiece, the one with all 3 of them at the conservatory. Zayden had drawn a crown on all their heads in crayon. She left it exactly that way. Tell me again why we're doing this here, Travis asked, turning toward her. Because it's ours, she said, smoothing the front of her dress. And because I've had enough of ballrooms and guest lists I don't recognize. He crossed the room and stopped in front of her. You're sure you don't want anything bigger? I've already had bigger, she said softly. I want real. He studied her for a moment before his expression broke into something unguarded. You're too good at saying exactly what I need to hear. She reached for his hand. That's because I mean it. Outside, the guests began arriving, a handful of close friends, family, and people who had stood by them through the chaos of change. Travis's former boss, now retired, brought a bouquet of wildflowers from his garden. Emily's assistant, who had stayed on even after the company was sold, brought her mother, who insisted on blessing them with a poem she'd written that morning. The ceremony wasn't formal. There were no chairs in rows, just blankets and benches scattered across the backyard garden, which had been transformed by string lights and potted hydrangeas. Zayden served as both ring-bearer and officiant, declaring, "By the power of love and pancakes," before everyone burst out laughing. "You may now do the kiss part," he added, clearly annoyed by having to remember lines. Travis didn't hesitate. He kissed Emily like it was the first time and the last all at once, the kind of kiss that made the world hush around them. Afterward, they danced in the grass, barefoot and laughing. Emily's dress had dirt on the hem, and Travis had syrup on his tie from Zayden's wedding pie, which turned out to be a mash of apples and marshmallows in a graham cracker crust. At twilight, the music slowed. The guests had wandered indoors for drinks or drifted home. Only a few remained, lounging around a fire pit, watching the stars blink into view. Emily sat beside Travis on the porch swing, her bare feet curled under her, sipping lemonade. Zayden had fallen asleep on a blanket in the grass, his head resting on the dinosaur plush Emily had given him after their very first museum day. "I didn't think I'd ever have this," Travis said quietly. She rested her head against his shoulder. You mean a porch swing? I mean this piece. She looked over at him, her eyes lit soft by the glow of the porch light. You gave it to me first. He laced his fingers through hers. Keep wondering if this is all a dream. It's not, she said. It's just the part no one tells you about, the stillness after the storm. He kissed her temple. Then, I hope the storm never comes back. In the months that followed, they settled into a rhythm that was theirs alone. Emily took on a consulting role for a nonprofit that built tech labs in underserved schools, something she could do from home. Travis started sketching again, and with Emily's quiet encouragement, submitted a design to a city-wide architectural competition. He won second place, and a local developer offered to fund his first community project, a hybrid park library space in the Bronx. Zayden started first grade, proudly announcing to his new classmates that his mom ran the internet and his dad built cities. They didn't correct him. One Saturday, they painted the kitchen a soft teal. Zayden insisted on adding glow-in-the-dark stars to the ceiling. Emily let him. Travis climbed up to stick them in place, even though they'd never matched the constellation map. They hosted Sunday breakfasts with friends and neighbors. Emily learned to make coffee in the old French press Travis had used since college. Travis learned to enjoy documentaries about space. Zayden grew taller, smarter, and more curious by the day. They didn't chase perfect. They embraced the mess, the burnt toast, the overdue bills, the nights when nothing went as planned. But above all, they chose each other again and again. One evening, a year after the wedding, Travis came home with paint on his hands and a folded sheet of paper in his pocket. Emily was in the backyard, trimming herbs. He kissed her before speaking. They approved my design for the second location, he said. They want me to lead the project. Her eyes lit up. You said yes, right? I said I'd talk to you first. She leaned up and kissed him again. Then now I'm saying yes. He wrapped his arms around her and held her tight. Somewhere inside, Zayden shouted that dinner was burning in a good way, and they both laughed. As the sun dipped below the rooftops, casting golden light across the garden, they stood together in the quiet certainty of everything they'd built and everything still to come. They had chosen love, not the kind that demanded sacrifice or sparkled only in the spotlight, but the kind that stayed, that made space, that grew. And in that space, they had found not just each other, but a home neither of them had ever truly had before.